Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Deep Life. Today, we are joined by Megan Finney.
Megan is a certified social worker in the state of New Jersey, and she has experience providing supervised, individual psychotherapy to adolescents and young adults with mental and behavioral health diagnoses. She is currently working towards a license in clinical social work while also serving in an outpatient setting for pediatric hematology patients.
This was such a great conversation and so unique from any other episode we've taped. Mental health is a topic that's really important to us because we believe that in order to live a deep life, it's essential that we balance our physical, mental, and spiritual wellness.
All right, welcome back to The Deep Life. Today we are joined by Megan Finney, who is a licensed social worker out of New Jersey. Real excited.
I'm so excited. Well, Megan, welcome to The Deep Life.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Okay, Pat. So I want to give the listeners a little background on how we met because I think I was scrolling one day through a wellness hashtag. I can't remember if it was like Wellness Wednesday or Wellness Journey, which is something that I look for each and every day because we are continuing our wellness journey. It's a lifelong journey. And I saw your post about an anxiety guide that you had just written, and it was free. And I thought to myself, oh, that's so interesting. I've struggled with anxiety my whole life, and I don't think I know one person that really doesn't have some form of it. So, I liked your post, and then you messaged me right away and sent me this fabulous guide.
God, so good.
Breaking down anxiety. And I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, Dan, you need to read this. We have to ask Meg to get on the podcast because it's overwhelming the amount of people who struggle with anxiety, especially in this day and age, not only with the state of the world right now, but it's just becoming more and more common. So that's how we connected, we interacted, and here you are. So let's dive deep into anxiety. But before we do, could you give us and our listeners a little background on who you are, your social work, how you got into the field? Kind of tell us all about that.
Yeah, so I have a bachelor's degree in family and child studies, and then I started working in a care management organization working with adolescents and young adults who have mental and behavioral health problems. With care management, it's typically the highest level of care to get involved with those services. So those adolescents ranged from like childhood sexual abuse to anxiety to bipolar disorder to oppositional defiant disorder to kids that were in the juvenile detention centers, psychiatric hospitals. Like, it was a really wide range of mental health disorders that these kids had. So once I started doing that, I realized I really did want to go into social work. So I went and applied for a master's degree program, which I have a master's in social work from Rutgers, and I took the state licensing exam. I am licensed, and now I typically work with pediatrics in a hospital setting with a hematology diagnosis. And then on the side, I was doing outpatient psychotherapy with adolescents and young, like teenage aged kids as well.
That's amazing.
Anxiety and all different things. So
yeah, I commend you. That's going to be so hard, especially with young kids.
Yeah, it's an eye opener to how many kids have a mental health diagnosis or struggle with different things, and a lot of it can be environmental induced in their home environment, and some things are just outside of their control, and it's biological and a chemical imbalance. And it's sad because I think mental health is not always it's stigmatized still, right? So I think bringing awareness to it is important, which is what partly led me to writing Just Breathe.
Oh, fabulous. Yeah, we'll dive deep into that after too, for sure. And I agree. I think that it is definitely becoming more prevalent and people are talking about it too. But I do think that there's also a gender difference as well, which is like why I'm really glad that I made Dan read it. I should say made him enjoyed it just as much as I did. But, he struggles with it, but in a much different way than I do. So we'll dive deep into that. But before we get to it, so if you could you give us an idea of what anxiety exactly is and how it can be classified or identified in different people?
Yeah. So generally speaking, anxiety is an emotion. To some degree, it's like you said before, it's safe to say that everybody has some degree of anxiety, but the severity level ranges from person to person. And to be formally diagnosed, you need to meet certain amounts of criteria based on the DSM and have a medical diagnosis from a licensed professional, a psychiatrist, or like a physician. In the DSM, there's several different categories of anxiety. And to name a few, there's generalized anxiety disorder, agoraphobia, panic disorder, separation anxiety disorder, there's social anxiety disorder. So it really can vary. And again, you need to have a formal diagnosis, clinical criteria to have that meets like those each individual category.
That makes so much sense. Yeah.
Oh. What is DSM?
It's like the diagnostic book that gives all the criteria for just different diagnoses that physicians or psychiatrists or therapists will follow.
Gotcha.
It's like a manual, essentially.
Yeah. And when anyone who's struggling with anxiety, or what they're maybe not even realizing is anxiety, or maybe some sort of depression or panic, nervousness, how do they kind of take that step either to see someone or go to someone? Like, what is, I don't want to say the process, but do people usually voluntarily do it? Or is it like through their physician or maybe primary care, and then they're, recommended to a social worker? Like, what's that process like?
I think it varies from individual to individual, right? So if it's a child, the parents might notice that they get really nervous all the time by different physical symptoms they're feeling, or they know their kid, right? So they can see the fear in their faces or if it's like going to a store or going out in public or to a birthday party and they're constantly hesitant, they might bring that up with the pediatrician and move on from there. I think as we get older, I think we learn to some degree how to identify our feelings and what is going on. So some common symptoms with anxiety are feeling constantly worried, reoccurring intrusive thoughts, an increased heart rate. There's dizziness. You might be breathing heavier. You might have an impending fear of doom, or like something bad is always going to happen. Generally just feeling nervous and restless or tired, weak, so if you feel that way and you're constant, it's going to trigger like something might be off and I might need to talk to at least my doctor. And then they might recommend you to either talking to a therapist or seeing a psychiatrist to really work on learning how to manage and cope with all of those symptoms that you're feeling.
Yeah. And that resonates so much with me because you described that in the Just Breathe anxiety. And I've definitely struggled with anxiety my whole life. It's certainly in my family. My mother is very anxious. I have cousins and aunts, and everybody is kind of just like it's almost like a state of just being unsafe all the time and panicking, not having enough time to do something, not having enough money to do something, not having social skills to like be in a group of people. It's like an anxious feeling constantly, and it can be very overwhelming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's normal for like day to day to have some sense of anxiety or nervousness about something, but when it's debilitating and it's affecting different life domains and it's preventing you from moving forward or completing tasks or going out, that's when it becomes problematic, and you should really seek further assistance to kind of get skills that can help you manage from day to day, but also to process and figure out what's really triggering and the root cause of your anxiety.
Absolutely. I love that. The root cause. Yeah, absolutely. So we just touched on a little bit of kind of, how anxiety affects different people, but let's get into that a little bit more, because very similar to the health and fitness industry, there's really like a no one size fits all. There's not like you're strong and powerful, but then you're weak and into it. There's a lot of in between. So you mentioned it, but let's go a little bit deeper on how anxiety can really show up in different people. And maybe we can talk a little bit about the male and female dynamics and children too, because it's fascinating. I think the children aspect really brings up a lot of questions in me, because I didn't feel like I had anxiety really until I hit like high school and college, where I was more in tune with my thoughts and just kind of panicking all the time. But when young kids, I know that I had anxiety when I was younger. I just didn't know how to identify with it.
Right. Yeah. So, definitely just like overall wellness, anxiety is not one size fits all.
No.
can be general. It can be difficult to pinpoint that root cause for some people. It could just be your everyday worry. Like, am I going to get to the grocery store after work, or am I going to have to stay at work late and have this extra meeting that I'm not prepared for? Or sometimes it's just being unable to fall asleep at night because your mind is racing and you don't know how to calm it down and shut it off, right? That happens to so many of us all the time, so like little things, I shouldn't say little things, but like things like that, you might not think that there's anything further to it. And it's just how you are. And there's ways to just keep pushing through. But it's important to learn how to cope with it, because after a while, all those things every single day become exhausting and it's draining. And then you're like anxious that you're going to be anxious. So how do you deal with that? Right. And then like socially, people have difficulty with social interactions. They might even have that heart racing feeling when they're sending a text to their best friend and they're afraid their friend's going to not understand what they're saying because it's not in person and it's virtual. Right. And you can't see the facial interactions or the body language, or, even just going out. If it's debilitating enough for some people, they might be canceling things altogether and not going out into public, or especially with COVID today, right? I mean, people have heightened anxiety about everything.
Yes.
Yeah,
that rings so true. Someone that's closest to me, she is like a barrel of laughs. She's got a great sense of humor. Like, when she walks into the room, she's the life of the party. She can talk to anyone. But behind the scenes, because I know her so intimately, she tells me all the time she has severe social anxiety. But it's that mask that people put on, right? Because you don't want to, again, like you were saying, you really don't want to be stigmatized or have that label of having a mental disorder or having anxiety project being fine. But yet those people who are the most charismatic, the funniest, the liveliest, those are probably the ones that can really have debilitating thoughts in their head. And that's what we really want to bring awareness to, because it stems over to every aspect of their lives.
Absolutely. I think too, I'd refer to that probably closely to like high functioning anxiety, right? They appear to have everything together and they're on time and they're on point and their work ethic is amazing.
Totally
and
me.
It's just like perfectionism.
And then internally they're like, I like worried about being on time, worried about making mistakes, worried about, did they say that correctly during their meeting or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. And you mentally rehearse it in your head. The scenario is like, wait, I should have, like you were saying, I should have sent that text message a different way. Or, oh my gosh, I was just on this call, but I should have responded this way instead of that. And then it just snowballs. It's almost building momentum in the wrong direction, right? Exactly. So that's our slogan. It's you want to build momentum to have a peaceful mind, but when you're in that anxious state, those thoughts can be so debilitating because you're building momentum in the wrong direction. It's going backwards and making it worse.
I mean, anxiety is it's the most common mental health diagnosis in the United States. I think it's, if I remember correctly, over 40 million people have anxiety in the US.
I believe it.
It's a high number.
It is. It's such a high number. So, well, that kind of brings us to, let's get into your guide and the Just Breathe guide. Because like I said, when I read it, it resonated so much. And even though I can say, I do feel like I have anxiety under control. I mean, even just before getting on this, I've got the laundry going. I was trying to do coffee and then like, wait a minute, I didn't finish folding the laundry and I was getting anxious. Like, oh my gosh, it's like, I wasn't able to finish everything before jumping on this call. But it's like, Elise, take a deep breath. The laundry's going to be there. No one knows. Well, everybody knows now because I just put it on. No one knows you didn't fold it. So can you give us an idea of really what prompted you to write this amazing, Just Breathe guide? And let's go through maybe, some of the exercises and the tips and tools that you have to combat it, because it's so important. But let's start with why you felt the need to write it to reach a wider audience.
Yeah, so I agree with what you just said, because before this, I was like, oh my God, I got a shower. I just finished working out. I have this call. Breathe, right? Like, you're going to be fine. You're going to get it done. Change that mindset. But for me, I wanted to write Just Breathe because I've dealt with anxiety. I've never been formally diagnosed with anxiety, but until I really started to understand what my body was saying to me, what it was feeling, my thought process, which I attribute a lot to like learning in school and practicing, I realized that I do have anxiety and that anxiety is normal and it's okay to have anxiety. And most people do have some degree of anxiety, right? But like, how do you silently continue to suffer with anxiety and not know how to deal with it and cope with it, but you're too hesitant to go talk to your doctor because mental health, again, is stigmatized, right? There's basic tools that anybody can utilize, whether you have anxiety or not, to either change your thought process, calm down your central nervous system when you're feeling panicked or having an anxiety attack, to start reframing your thoughts, to being able to be more mindful and present in the moment and not having those what if or futuristic thoughts that tend to lead to anxiety. I just felt like if I can figure it out and I can use these tools that I typically teach my clients or the people that I'm working with, that they're basic enough that they provide value, but anybody would be able to resonate with them. And maybe it'll help somebody else realize that they do have anxiety and it's okay. And there are tools out there to help you manage from the day to day and get through it and not be in a constant state of fear or anxious or worriness.
I think that resonates with me so much. I feel like I have a similar experience with anxiety, as in like it was always kind of there, definitely like under the surface, and I just didn't know that it was anxiety. Didn't know how to deal with it, but I would repress a lot of emotions and just kind of not. And I got into the point where it's almost like, to keep myself safe, I just wasn't feeling anything, like so the good things or the bad things nearly as I should. And then all of a sudden, like I'll snap or I'll be really upset, and like Elisa ask me what's wrong. I'm like, I don't even know. I don't know what I'm upset about right now. I'm just upset. Like, leave me alone. Like, which is just like clearly like unhealthy, but like along way, I picked up tools, like kind of intrinsically or just kind of paying attention, where I figured out that like, okay, like sitting down and journaling and getting my thoughts out onto paper works because I'm able to get those emotions out, kind of clear that out, and then I'll feel much better after, even though I'm kind of socially anxious and I don't want to go talk to somebody about my feelings or I don't want to be around anybody. And then like reading your guide, it was like all these things. It was like the breath work, the journaling, all these things that I had almost like wished that somebody had taught me, 15 years ago, or 20 when I was younger, so that I would have been able to recognize like, oh, this is anxiety and these tools help, rather than spending like 15, 20 years slowly trying to figure out like this thing and this thing. So that's why I really loved your guide. I think it's so useful. But yeah, maybe we can get into some of those tools, because I think it's so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with the journaling one, because we've just been doing journaling maybe the past like 2 or 3 years, really intensively journaling, like every morning. But it can be intimidating too, because your thoughts going on paper really make it real. Because when you put them in your head, it's like, okay, I can make them pass. But then when you put them on paper, it's like, ooh, wow, I'm doubly looking at what's going on. So let's talk a little bit about journaling and how beneficial it can be for.
So I think journaling is great. I think, people get intimidated by journaling because they feel like there's a right or wrong way to do it. Yeah. And there's not a right or wrong way to do it, right? Like, you're writing out your thoughts. You could just be free writing whatever's coming to your mind. And it's easy to feel like you have to write about something specific, because like when you're in school, you're taught to, here's these questions, write an essay on this, or here's this topic that you have to research, write about that. But you're never really taught to free write or to just journal, right? So once you're able to kind of bypass that and you just start writing, or if there's something specific that is on your mind that you just want to start writing out, it's an easy tool to be able to look back and reflect and then start questioning yourself. Like, well, what evidence is there that this is actually going to happen, or that has this happened to me before, and this is why I'm feeling anxious about this upcoming event that might be occurring. I think that it's really underutilized. And Dan, like you said, if we bottle everything up and we don't talk about it and we don't get it out, at some point it's going to come out, whether it's irritability, it's anger, it's sadness, it's crying, it's, typically going to be towards somebody else. You're going to project feelings, and it's not necessarily because of that person. So even if you're not able to verbalize what you're saying, what you're feeling or thinking, being able to just write it down, whether you share it with anybody or not, is a way to get it off your chest, to get it out, and to get some type of release from whatever it is that you're thinking and feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. I think that's, yeah, it's so, it's so funny that you said the thing about school, because that I really kind of identified myself as like, I don't like to write. I really don't. It's honestly because I never did good in school. I really didn't like school. I didn't get good grades. Being put into that box with everyone, like, you have to answer this question, you have to write 10 pages on it, and if it's not correct, you're an F student. And that was just ingrained in the back of my mind, which again brought a lot of anxiety in.
Right, because you were being labeled, right?
Yes,
you had
exactly.
a label added to you because you wrote X, Y, and Z, and you were expected to do it differently or compared to other kids. And
yes,
yeah, exactly.
My creative juices were just cut off. And I was like, oh my gosh, I must not be smart. Like, I can't write. And I suppressed that for so long. And then when I like jumped over that hurdle, just to begin journaling, like the most simplest things, like you said, free forming, even just, I don't know what to write right now. Write that, 100 times, because writing it, the portals will open up. You're going to kind of switch on that. What's the right terminology? Like a new neural plasticity, like the new brain waves that are going to come in, and it opens up like little creative outlets. And now I like love journaling. I think I journal for almost like 40 minutes in the morning now. I get up and it's like the most beautiful thing. I write about like what I'm grateful for, the past, yesterday's blessings. And then I'll do really intense journaling, like shadow work and things like that. But just beginning it, even if it's, 10 sentences, has been so beneficial. So that's great.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be bad. It could be literally about anything. And there's so many, even if you just go on Amazon, there's so many journaling prompt, like workbooks that it gives you ideas, or it asks you those questions that get your mind flowing. And then you learn a new habit, and then you can eventually rewrite.
That's amazing. That's fabulous. That's great. Okay. So yes, journaling one. The other one that we really want to get into, because as soon as we saw it on the Just Breathe guide, Dan and I grasped Dan. I was like, oh my gosh, she has box breathing on here, which has been it's been a part of our, wellness journey and our routine for a couple of years now. We have different box breathing and pranayama breathing on our Momentum app, which breath work is so imperative to calming the mind. But I want to hear more about it from you, because you're an expert in it and you probably have much more correct terminology than we do. But let's dive into the power of our breath and how calming our mind and different breath work practices that can really aid with calming the anxiety.
Yeah. So I love breath work. And I think that for me, it's probably one of the biggest tools that I use when I'm feeling anxious is breathing.
Yes.
Box breathing, it typically is done by controlling our breaths, and it's a set of 4, and you hold each equal part of your breath for the same amount of time. And essentially, I guess, in your mind, you're visualizing going around in like a square. So you hold for like a 4 count, you breathe in for a 4 count, you hold for like a 4 count, exhale, and then hold again before inhaling. And the idea is to kind of just calm your central nervous system. And then by focusing on your breaths, you're distracting your mind, and you're able to clear whatever it is that's going through, and kind of just reset and refocus on what's happening, and kind of have a little bit more clarity on what's going through your mind.
Yes. Yeah. And that was so, like, Dan introduced this maybe a couple years ago to us too. And we weren't even really doing it to combat anxiety. Like I said, the practices that we've been, practicing over the past couple of years, just like simply for our wellness journey, it just, the little steps, the little momentum that we built was combating anxiety and our nervousness, our depression, that we didn't even know was a two-way street. It's like, oh wait, we're really just trying to be healthy and get into our breath.
Better.
Yeah.
By breathing better, how to like manage our mind better, which is so cool.
I think and I think that goes into like it falls into that overall wellness, right? Like even exercise in itself, it's one of the most underutilized tools for anxiety, because it creates endorphins, and it creates that like better mood and that energy that we need, and it's a distraction, and it resets our body. how many people think like, I'm anxious, let me go work out?
Yeah.
Right.
Not as many people that should be. I know I don't all the time, right? But
Yeah.
it does. A lot of it plays in part, and it's all interconnected to some degrry.
Everything is everything.
I
Yep.
was just, yeah, absolutely. Everything is everything. And that's, go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, so like there's like almost like kind of a cliche, like you need to get out of your head. But
Yeah.
as the exercise is you're becoming embodied. You're getting into your body and getting out of your mind. And then that's bring you to the present moment, just like the breathing brings you to the present moment, where
Exactly.
anxiety, basically worrying about the future.
Yep.
But now you're able to live in the present where there is no future. Like nothing exists outside of this moment. So the more you can bring yourself to that moment.
Yeah, because you're not going to be worried. If you're worrying about something futuristic during your workout, you're probably not having the best workout because your mind's not there, right? But if you can take that step back and focus on the workout and be present, be mindful in that moment, chances are when you're done, your anxiety is going to at least be lessened and decreased and not so consuming.
Absolutely. And that once you do it, a couple days a week, and you build up that momentum over time and continue to do the little exercises, the little breath work, one day it just kind of clicks like, oh wow, I'm much more clear in my head than I ever did. I think that kind of in society, we want everything really fixed. We talk about this all the time. Like everything is readily available to us at an instant, and it's wonderful that we live in this day and age that's available to us, but we do have to bring it back to our bodies and realize that, within our bodies and within our mind, it can take a little bit more time than an instant. So I do feel like people can get very discouraged. Like, oh, I tried meditation. I tried breath work. It didn't work. Or I tried therapy. It didn't work. Well, maybe it didn't work just because you didn't allow it to, or you maybe just need to go and get through that nitty gritty, 10 days, 10 months, 10 years sometimes.
Yeah.
But the journey is so well worth it. And if you can take a step back and reframe your mindset, because that's really what anxiety is, right? Reframing your mindset that this is a learning lesson and I'm becoming more resilient and I'm allowing these thoughts to not control me and understand that they're just thoughts, and how can I repurpose them in a more beneficial mind frame? Because again, like the stigma of having anxiety, having that mental disorder, people can jump to conclusions very quickly that, oh my gosh, I throw your hands up and this is my diagnosis. I'm doomed. And I want to get into that. I know Dan had this question that he wants to dive into, but you want to add?
Yeah, I guess we might as well just jump into that. So I think we touched on it a little bit before, the idea of like this spectrum of health. And in the same sense where with fitness, where it's not about being either fit or unfit. And it's not about like, once you get fit, you're fit forever. It's a lifelong process of taking care of your body. And I would argue like mental health is the exact same thing. There's going to be this spectrum of mental health, and you can always get better, and you're always going to be in the process of kind of getting better or getting worse.
Right.
So you need to kind of like target this thing, where I think almost too often in our society, we have the idea of like, you have a mental disease and that you have it forever, or you don't. If you've never been diagnosed with, we'll say anxiety, if you've never had like a clinical diagnosis, then you're like, well, I don't have anxiety, but you're still, freaking out about going to work on Monday, like Sunday night. It's felt like the Sunday scaries, like that's anxiety. So if you're worried about something like that, even though you don't have a diagnosis, like you're still on the spectrum of mental health. Like if you have a mind,
absolutely,
it's healthy. So I just want to kind of get into that. Not really a question. I'm just kind of leading you in a direction that I would love to talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great concept, and I do feel that there's a wide spectrum of mental health, and I think there's a slight difference between our overall mental well-being and a mental health disorder. Right? So again, like a disorder, you need a clinical diagnosis, but that doesn't mean that just because you're not diagnosed that you don't have it, or vice versa, because maybe like yourself or like myself, like I never went to a psychiatrist, or I never talked to my doctor about my anxiety, right? So we're still living with that day-to-day mental health distortion or difficulty, right? So I think, I agree. I think it's a lifelong journey. I think that some days are going to be better than others. Nobody has a perfectly good day every single day, 365 days out of the year, but it's every single day recognizing what you're grateful for, how you can benefit your mind. Are you being present for that day? Are you taking the time to nourish what's going on in your mind? If you're having a terrible day and you really just need to sit around and do nothing all day, then maybe that's what you need to do to relax a little bit, because you've been on the go for 24/7 and you haven't taken that time to really listen to what your body needs, right? I think that our mental health is definitely connected to our physical health. And I think that it's also rooted in our, I guess, generalized health, for lack of better terms. Like people talk about that gut health connection,
Yes.
brain connection, right?
Yes.
So more and more research is showing that your gut's microbiome is connected to your mental well-being. So if we're not addressing our physical health and the things that we're nourishing our body with, it will affect our mental state and our emotional state and the way that we cope.
I love that you brought that up, and it resonates so true. And I think that's people, like, I love that you said that we're discovering more about the mind gut connection, because we had no idea about this when we were young, or, you know, in college, even like 6, 7, 8 years ago, we didn't realize this. Like, I didn't know that like having cookies and pizza was going to affect me mentally. Like, how could that be? Exactly. And it's like, literally, your stomach has a brain, if you think of it that way, in the simplest terms.
Yeah, you say gut, people say like your gut, trust your gut instinct, but nobody ever taught you that that's actually a real thing.
Absolutely.
And that maybe your gut is probably most likely more involved than your mind and your brain, when it comes to making decisions or feelings. I know like most hormones, like serotonin is made in your gut, as well as many other vital.
Absolutely.
So, I'll say it again. Everything is everything. You can't
absolutely.
And separate physical health from mental health, or development in either one. So.
And that's why, like I said, I wanted you on the podcast, because all these little things, we tend to, like you said, compartmentalize, like mental health, physical health, spiritual health, but the mind, body, and soul is all connected. It's taken us, over a decade to realize that, and we're still learning every single day, newer things, new implementations. But like I was saying, we wished we had people like you, or people like Bruce Lipton, or anyone who's, writing books on the mind gut connection when we were in college and, in our early 20s, because we were just, I don't want to say we were aiding in our detriment, but we were, because we didn't have tools that we do now. So I love that you're here to be the voice of reason, to give people this, just breathe, the anxiety guide, for us to have the conversation that, of course we're in the health and fitness industry, but we take our mental health and our spirituality, our mindset so passionately, because it's all connected. Like, we wouldn't be able to be where we are now without the mindset that we have, which contributes to the everyday life.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think you have to nourish your mind as much as you nourish your physical body and your spiritual self too. It's hard. And I think going back to the gut brain connection, there's still so much research that could be done on that. But I was reading a study not that long ago, but I think when your gut microbiome, if I remember correctly, when it's off balance and it's not the way, like the pH levels aren't the way that it should be, you have a higher increased risk of anxiety and depression.
Oh,
yeah, absolutely.
And then how often are we looking at that and correcting that to help reduce anxiety and depression? You might still have it, but will it be as severe, or are we just going in a different direction and not really taking the time to care and nourish our bodies the way that we should be?
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to when we first began speaking, that root cause. What's the root cause of anxiety? I mean, obviously there's, it can be from traumas, familial.
Right, absolutely.
But the roots, it's not going to get better if you're planting it with those detrimental foods, the vegetable oil, the processed foods, the chemicals that are making imbalances in your body.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I didn't, like you were saying, I didn't know that, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So I'm so glad that we can share this knowledge with our listeners, just with the world in general, because it's it needs to be said, and it needs to be heard.
Absolutely. It needs to be talked about more and less stigmatized, and that there's not a one size fits all to how to manage or deal with these things either. right? So the way I cope with anxiety might be different than how you cope with anxiety and how Dan copes with anxiety. There's different tools that resonate with different people, but having access to them and being able to learn them and know that it's going to take time for them to even start working, right? Going back to box breathing, I've had clients say, well, I tried it twice and it didn't do anything for me.
Right.
Were you trying it? Were you aggravated and already had your mind set that it wasn't going to work for you? Like, we kind of try to reiterate that it takes time and it's not something that's going to be fixed overnight, right? You have to put in the work. You have to be willing to utilize those tools. And at some point, hopefully they do become second nature and you're going to be using them before you even realizing that you're anxious or that you're being triggered by something.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that you said that, because I feel like we were both very similar to that client about the box breathing. I did that with meditating. I used to meditate. I would listen to guided meditations, but I still I had such an anxious mind. I would do it every other day. And then I stopped for a couple of months and I started again. And it was like a yo-yo. But then I just realized, almost put your ego aside and really just do this wholeheartedly for, 30, 60 days and see what happens. Yep. And it was miraculous. Each day it began getting better and better when I kind of let my thoughts pass and realized that I am not my thoughts. I can get through this 15 meditation very easily. And then I was able to increase it to 18 minutes, then 20, then 22. And now I can meditate for an hour. So it's that process. It's the building the momentum forward, as long as you, like you said, just realize it's going to take a little time. But it's beautiful. The time is beautiful. Yeah. And now I can't imagine not meditating. I can't imagine not doing the breath work. I can't imagine not journaling. So you almost just have to get over the little roller coasters, right? Wellness is a roller coaster journey, and just allow yourself to embrace the changes that come, because I promise you guys, we've been there. Meg, you've been there. Dan's been there. We know so many people who get over that hump, and there is light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Absolutely. It's putting in that work ethic and that, I guess, that grit, right? That it's not easy, but you're investing in yourself, you're investing in your mind, and you're doing something and working towards bettering yourself and calming yourself and having the tools to make you a better person and the best version of you.
And it translates to every aspect of your life. It makes my workouts better. It makes cooking in the kitchen better. It makes, walking down the street better, just everything. You just have almost a new zest for life when you're not being anxious and nervous about it, when you know and you can almost feel safe in your body.
Absolutely.
It's that safety. Safety is the key word that I feel like I really intrinsically meditate and kind of try to just ground myself in every day, that this world is friendly and safe if you want it to be, and you can make it that way.
Yep. No, absolutely. I totally agree with all of that.
Oh my gosh.
Fear and anxiety, like I was saying, just even repressing emotions, it all takes so much energy. It all it drains you. So when you're constantly stressed about anything, you're putting so much of your energy into kind of fighting that and being stressed that you're not able to put your energy toward the other things you love. So like Elise is saying, once you can release that a little bit, the things that you're doing just feel so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when if you have that much of a heightened, anxious mindset and your body, you're constantly in that fight or flight mode, right? You're heightened, you're tense, that's takes a lot of physical work for your body to be that tense and that nervous. So once you can control that, your body starts to calm down and you just automatically begin at some point to start to feel better, because you're not so high strung all the time and in that constant fight or flight mode.
Amazing. Yeah, oh my gosh. This has been so eye-opening. I swear, like I said, my anxiety journey, my wellness journey, our wellness journey has been going on, but I just learned something new every day, different implementation. So thank you for joining us, Meg. Is there anything else that you think is really important that you want to share, or anything that we missed?
No, I think just that, again, iterating the importance of talking about mental health and talking about your anxiety and knowing that you're not labeled just because you have anxiety. And I think we really, as a society, need to work towards not being so labeling towards people and having that stigma towards mental health, and that chances are your friend next to you also has anxiety or suffers from some degree of their mental overall well-being, being like having issues. And then just really getting it out there and being more open about it and not being so afraid to talk about it, and know that there's tools and ways to help you overcome that, whether it's just a simple guide or talking to your doctor and going into therapy and working through it with a professional who can help guide you through that process, because you're not alone and you're never going to be alone during it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
beautiful.
so amazing. Well, thank you, Meg. Is there, can we direct people to your social media? Where can people find you, learn more about like your guide? If they did want to download the Just Breathe, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my probably my Instagram is the most utilized social media that I have. But I have a link in my bio there. They can fill out the quick form, and then, as like I did with you, I'll send them a message and then email them over the guide. And then I'm always posting different tips and insight and educational information for anxiety and other wellness related things.
Awesome,
Yeah.
Meg. Well, wow, we went deep
Yeah.
and I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank
It's-
you.
Yeah, it's
and
an
the guide for sure.
Oh my gosh, yeah. The importance, like you said, we don't want to suppress it anymore. We have to talk about it. It's okay. We all suffer from these feelings. So thank you, Meg, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.